the CZ Shadow 2 and the Tanfoglio Stock 2. Two powerhouses in USPSA's production division. This is everything you need to know. What's up, YouTube? Thanks for stopping by. I am the Average Doomsday Prepping Dude. So this is going to be a two-part review. The first today being a mechanics and features review, where you can see both pistols side by side and see what those differences are. And then the second review is going to be a shooting review, where I go to USPSA match and I bring both pistols, and I'm going to be shooting both stages on the same day with the same conditions. That way I can see which one I actually perform better with. This is like 10 yards, right?
Yep. So shoot that thing, tack driver.
Okay, let's see how well this was.
That was nice.
Is it on the A?
Yep.
1C.
1C.
Oh yeah, 1C. 10 rounds, pretty good groupings. Okay, there are some weight and size differences between the two pistols. The Shadow 2 weighs around 46 ounces, whereas the Stock 2 weighs around 43 ounces. The Shadow 2 is also about a ½ inch or ¼ inch longer than the Stock 2. It also has a regular barrel, whereas the Stock 2 has a bull barrel. And I think because of the bull barrel, you know, the bull barrel is about that long inside the pistol. The Tanfoglio, because it's about, you know, ½ inch shorter, but it has more weight concentrated and distributed evenly in the frame. I think that the Stock 2 actually has a little bit better weight balance than the Shadow 2. The Shadow 2, being longer and heavier, feels a little bit more front heavy than the Stock 2. But I think when you're running around, I like having the weight, you know, balance a little bit better. So before I even take the pistols apart, you'll notice how different the magazines are. The Stock 2 magazine is on the right, and the Shadow 2 magazine is on the left. This is a standard SP01 CZ75 magazine. You'll notice how much larger the Stock 2 magazine is than the Shadow 2 magazine. It's longer from front to back. You can actually see that there. You know, you can see it there. And you'll notice these dimples here. It's because it has a little spacer that runs at the rear of the magazine. You can actually see that kind of there. That's behind the bullets when you you know, you load them. So the magazine is oversized front to back. Width-wise, it's about the same. So the Tanfoglio Stock 2 has an oversized magwell to accommodate that, and this is what's called their large frame magazines, and this is a large frame pistol compared to the Shadow 2. So when looking at the magwells, the magwell on the Stock 2 is a little bit larger to accommodate the larger magazines that I just showed you. The length of it from the front to the back is longer than the Shadow 2 because the Shadow 2 has a hammer spring cap at the base of the pistol, whereas the Tanfoglio does not. The width is about the same, but the length of it, because it has the oversized magazines, I think actually the magwell and magazines drop a little bit better and freer, and it's a little bit easier to reload. So I've taken the grip panels off the pistols so you could see a couple more differences. As I mentioned before, the Shadow 2 has a hammer spring cap at the base of the pistol, which is why the magwell is a little bit smaller. You'll also notice that the hammer spring itself is about this long, and the hammer strut goes down to about there. All those components sit behind what's called a magazine brake. That's this piece of metal here that's retained by this pin in the Shadow 2. Whereas on the Tanfoglio, there is no hammer spring cap at the base, which is why the magwell is so large, but you'll also notice you cannot see the hammer spring because the hammer spring actually loads from the top. You actually have to take out the whole sear mechanism to get the hammer mechanism out to load the spring, and that actually goes down to about there. The other thing you'll notice is the mag brake is actually milled into the frame. It's not a separate piece of metal held in place by a retaining pin. So I actually think that the design of the Tanfoglio is actually a little bit better, except for the fact that if you're trying to do a simple hammer spring change, you have to take a lot more components out of the pistol. So now that I've taken the slides off and put them side by side, you could actually really see that the Shadow 2 is a little bit longer than the Tanfoglio. But mechanically, you'll also notice how different they are to take apart. This is the non-bull barrel on the Shadow 2. Whereas the Tanfoglio kind of is like a 1911 where it has a little bushing in the front and then the bull barrel slides out. So look at this barrel. This barrel is ginormous compared to the Shadow 2. I mean, it is... the Shadow 2 barrel is so much thinner. I mean, you can see it is longer, but I really like the bull barrel on the Shadow 2, or the Tanfoglio Stock 2. This thing is just awesome. So one of the mechanical difference you'll notice between the two is the Tanfoglio actually has a firing pin block plunger safety, whereas the CZ Shadow 2 does not have a firing pin block plunger. I think that's true for all the Shadows, the regular Shadow and the Shadow 2. That makes them different from the regular CZ75s. So the biggest mechanical difference between the two pistols is how the trigger bar operates. The CZ75 uses a trigger bar lifter spring that you can see here and here. So as you pull the trigger, no extra pressure is actually required to pull the trigger as it gets closer towards the frame, towards the break point. Whereas on a Tanfoglio pistol, it actually uses a trigger bar lifter plunger that you can see here. And that is actually the cause of what's called stacking in Tanfoglio pistols. So as you pull the trigger and the trigger bar goes over the plunger, as it gets closer towards the break point, all the springs, the trigger bar lifter plunger and the hammer spring, they get more and more compressed. As you get more and more compressed, it makes it harder to pull the trigger for the breaking point. So Tanfoglios have what's called stacking, whereas CZs do not. It's just a smoother trigger. So inevitably on Tanfoglios, if you take a factory Tanfoglio, most people don't like it because of that stacking. So you have to end up replacing like all the springs. There's a spring underneath there. You have to replace a hammer spring, as well as the trigger return spring. I did that for my CZ as well, but it's now it's not, the stacking is not as noticeable on the Tanfoglio. But if you get a factory one, with all the factory springs, it's pretty terrible. So from the factory, the Shadow 2 actually has a better trigger, but I think once tuned, I like the Tanfoglio trigger a little bit better. So the last mechanical feature that's different on the CZs versus the Tanfoglio is the safety mechanisms. There's a little safety detent and spring right there on this side, as well as there's another one on the other side. Whereas the way the Tanfoglios operate, there is no spring or detent in the frame. Actually, the detent is built into the safety. So if you ever try and take the Tanfoglio apart versus the CZ Shadow 2, you're more likely to lose springs in your Shadow 2 than you are in your Tanfoglio because of the way the safety detents operate. All right, so that concludes my first review of the Tanfoglio Stock 2 versus the CZ Shadow 2 on the mechanical differences. If you haven't already, please take this time to like and subscribe. I have plenty of do-it-yourself videos for the Shadow 2 and Stock 2 that you can find in my playlist below. If you want to know how to do anything that I've done in my pistols, I should have a video for that, or you can just send me a message on YouTube or Facebook, and I will usually respond and be happy to answer you guys. So please stay home and stay safe with this coronavirus pandemic going on, and until next time, I'll see you then.